tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this very wonderful Monday afternoon. And you guys might notice a completely different background. Obviously, those of you guys on the podcast side, you guys won't see it, but I'm currently in a new house in Virginia. So part of the reason why I was having difficulties starting my stream earlier, so I apologize for all of you guys that might be a little confused, like, oh, where's the link and this, that, and the other. So that just explains a little bit. And it's been unfortunate because this Wi-Fi isn't as quick as the one at home. So if I do experience some technical difficulties during the show as well, I apologize for that in advance. But before I begin, we have a lot of basketball that needs to be talked about. So in the first segment, let me just move the mic closer a little bit. All right. In the first segment, we are going to be talking about the recent trade. DeMar DeRozan, he's been traded to the Sacramento Kings. Well, it's a sign-and trade, so we're just going to talk a little bit about that. And then in the second segment, we are going to talk about LeBron James and his pay cut. It was alleged before that he was going to take the max, but then the Lakers were able to come up with an agreement with LeBron, so that way they could avoid the second apron, and so he will take a slight pay cut with the Lakers. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. Then in the third segment, we have an update on FIBA and basketball. So because there's a lot of teams that just qualified and a lot of standout performances that I would like to mention. So we're going to talk about that in the third segment. Then in the fourth segment, we are going to talk about some basketball news, like, for example, Bronny's debut, some of the other trades that went down in the NBA, some of the free agent signings as well. And we also have a special fifth segment that I like to reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody to please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and go into the first topic, which is probably the biggest topic in all of basketball right now. Is DeMar DeRozan being sign and trade with the Sacramento Kings. Now, I said before on the previous podcast on Friday that it was suspected that he might go to a team in California, either the Lakers or the Clippers, whichever one best suited him, or even, like, at one point I thought it was going to be the Golden State Warriors, just because, like, you know, trying to replace Klay Thompson isn't really the easiest thing to do. But that wasn't what happened. And I'm not even going to lie to you guys, I completely forgot about the Sacramento Kings. And I really didn't think they were going to make a move to try to get DeMar DeRozan, but they ended up getting him anyway. And the sign and trade, let me just go ahead and find it. It's actually a three-team sign and trade that the Kings ended up agreeing to in order to deal with DeMar DeRozan. So, for one, the Kings received DeMar DeRozan. That's the only thing they got out of this trade. The San Antonio Spurs, they were also involved in this trade, and they ended up getting Harrison Barnes as well as a 2031 first-round pick swap. And then the Chicago Bulls, in return for trading away DeMar, ended up receiving Chris Duarte and 2 second-round picks. Now, I honestly feel like the loser of all of these teams in this trade is the Sacramento Kings. Because obviously, you know, in order to avoid the second apron, a lot of teams have been doing a bunch of sign-and trades so that way they don't put their team in a worse situation than what they already would be in. So really, I feel like the winner of this trade is Harrison Barnes and the 2031 first-round pick swap, because Harrison Barnes, like, of all of those players, I feel would bring, and in the situation that the Spurs are in right now, I feel like that would bring the Spurs a lot more value than Chris Duarte would bring to the Bulls. and then DeMar would bring to the Sacramento Kings. So that's like my opinion on like the trade overall. I'll just go ahead and run down a little bit of details on like how the DeMar DeRozan's contract is constructed with the Sacramento Kings. So as I said earlier, it was via sign and trade, and he signed 3-year, $70+ million agreement, and that's, I feel like, you know, for somebody like DeMar, that's a little bit less than what I would value him. Like, I don't really see DeMar DeRozan as a $70 million player, especially when you take into account some of the other contracts that were signed in free agency, like, for example, Franz Wagner making almost, let me just see this absurd contract because it's absolutely ridiculous, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the fourth segment. He signed 5-year, $224 million. Now, tell me, is Franz Wagner better than DeMar DeRozan? Me personally, I don't think so. Despite the fact that DeMar is one of the sort of older players in the NBA and one of the veteran players, I don't really think that that's really a contract that Franz Wagner deserves as opposed to DeMar. Granted, I don't think DeMar is worth that much money either, but if you're going to pay Franz Wagner all of that cash, then you should at least, you know, pay DeMar a lot more cash than that. But obviously, you know, given the second apron and the new CBA rules, it's really difficult to negotiate a huge contract worth that much. But, I mean, that's somewhat of a steal, you know, the fact that they were able to get DeMar at such a, it's such a low price. But obviously they would have to, they had to give up several other pieces in order to acquire DeMar. So, not really feeling all too well on that trade. And the mesh between, you know, the Kings and DeMar DeRozan is a little bit off. Like, I mean, the best players on the Kings are De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. And while they are very good, and while I do think that they are some snubs in the All-Star and as well as, you know, All-NBA selections, they are not really known as being three-point shooting threats. And now they just added another player that's also known for not being a three-point shooting threat. So I'm having difficulty trying to see how this would mesh with their system, because we know that De'Aaron Fox is a great dunker, phenomenal dunker. Same thing with DeMar DeRozan, and DeMar DeRozan is a phenomenal mid-range scorer. And the same applies with Sabonis being a phenomenal mid-range scorer. And I feel like, you know, scoring for twos in a league that prioritizing scoring threes, let alone, you know, some inefficient two-point shots, because DeMar DeRozan does take a lot of mid-ranges, same with Sabonis, I don't think that's going to really win them that many games. However, DeMar is a pretty, you know, he's a good defender. He's not a great defender. He's not a bad defender either. And he's slightly above decent just because of his height and his frame. So I'd say he's a rather, you know, a good defender at the small forward position. But at the same time, you know, you would much rather prioritize a three-point shooter when you have a playmaker like Sabonis and you have someone who attracts that much attention in the paint as De'Aaron Fox when he's, you know, playing downhill and trying to drive towards the basket. So, on the other hand, like with the Bulls, obviously they are trying to rebuild the team, and they've had trouble trying to trade Zach LaVine for like the longest time, and they were able to surprisingly negotiate a trade to send DeMar DeRozan away. Now let's see if Zach LaVine is going to follow suit and they, you know, commit to this full rebuild of the squad. So we already knew that DeMar wasn't going to return to the Bulls, but the real question was where he was going to go in free agency. And a lot of people speculated the Lakers, especially after Kendrick Lamar made that music video where they had, obviously DeMar made a cameo in that music video. I alluded to that in the previous podcast. But this is just another player that the Lakers miss out on in free agency. And there aren't really that many competent free agents left for the Lakers to really make a deal with, making it even more difficult to acquire talent on the squad. Now, according to this article, the fit of DeMar in Sacramento is going to take some work, as I said to before. De'Aaron Fox is already in place as primary ball handler. Malik Monk is also a high usage scorer when he does play. And while Kevin Huerter doesn't need the ball to be effective, he is an offense first player as a shooter. So sharing the ball amongst all of those players is going to take some time getting used to as well, for DeMar being the 1 or the 2 option on the Chicago Bulls, whichever one you want to call it. He could be either the 1 or the 2 option. It's really down to just opinions. And honestly, really, it could be down to the type of night that he's having as well. So defensively, the Kings have Keon Ellis as on the perimeter and not much else. So bringing DeMar, while it doesn't really improve their perimeter defense, it only really improves their scoring. So, and on top of that, DeMar not being a very competent three-point shooter doesn't help matters at all. Now, it's unclear how much he'll be able to help Sacramento on offense when he doesn't have the ball, because DeMar is a shot creator. He is one of those players that creates difficult shots and creates space in the mid-range. So you sort of have to give him the ball on certain possessions. And how that's going to mesh with the Kings and the offense they already have set, not entirely sure. But his late game shot making is obviously quite valuable and something that the Kings are definitely going to be utilizing. He was in the nominee for one of the most clutch players in the NBA while he was on the Chicago Bulls, and he's made some crazy difficult shots and crazy clutch shots for the Chicago Bulls. I remember he hit that one-legged three-point shot when the shot clock was expiring to beat the buzzer and ultimately win the game for the Chicago Bulls. That was a crazy shot. Like, if there was any type of player that resembled Kobe, it would be this. I pointed in the wrong direction. It would be this man right here, because his game is slightly similar to Kobe, and it makes sense because he grew up in the Bay Area and he grew up watching Kobe Bryant play basketball, and his game, since it is so heavy on the mid-range and him being a shooting guard, makes sense how he prioritizes taking those really difficult shots. And that's obviously where I think his value is going to come in, because not only is he clutch, but De'Aaron Fox is also rather clutch, and he was also in the nominee as being one of the more clutch players in the NBA at one point. Now, the Kings, they wanted a major talent upgrade to sort of push this team to the next level. So is DeMar going to be the type of player for the Kings? Not entirely sure, but we have to see how the rest of the season unfolds. And with that, that is going to be the end of the first segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the second segment, where I talk about LeBron James and his recent contract with the Lakers. I feel like I've talked about LeBron's contract for like 3 straight podcasts right now, but now it's like finalized, and the Lakers are just below the second apron, which helps LA in the future. So I will be talking a little bit about that contract and what it means right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to talk about LeBron James and his pay cut with the Lakers, what that means going into the future, and the difference between what he was supposed, if he were to sign the max, as opposed to him, signing this contract. So before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below on the ticker of every show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. It really ups the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. Allergies, excuse me. So, without further ado, let's go right ahead and talk about LeBron James and his new contract with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, if you guys remember before, he was supposed to sign a $104 million contract for 2 years, which is the max, and that would put the Lakers into the second apron, which is not ideal. You see, a lot of teams, they are doing a lot more sign-and trades. They're doing a lot more trading as well to sort of try and avoid going into that second apron. Now, this new contract that LeBron James took is 2-year, $101.3 million. So, just a little bit, $2.7 million below the actual contract that he was supposed to sign, the actual max that he was supposed to sign, or that we thought that he was going to sign. So this allowed the Lakers to stay below the second luxury tax, which is obviously, the second apron. And LeBron actually has some, he told reporters on Sunday that reducing his pay was all about giving the Lakers flexibility to try and improve the roster. According to Tim Bontemps from Twitter, LeBron says he took less money to get the Lakers under the second apron because when you're in a relationship, there are things you have to do sometimes. And he wanted to make sure they had more flexibility to alter the roster. So, $2.7 million isn't going to hurt LeBron. I'm sure it's not. He's one of the richest basketball players that the world has ever seen. So it makes total sense how I feel like he would take this pay cut. But at the same time, while he is incredibly rich, he's also incredibly cheap. And, there was this one time where he said that he doesn't pay for Spotify. He still has, he doesn't pay for Spotify Premium. He doesn't pay any subscriptions. If there's an app on the App Store that costs like $2, he's not buying it. I know $2 is not going to hurt LeBron James. That is like 2 cents to him. But he won't do it. So it makes sense how he wants the money. And obviously, LeBron, he's going to invest that money. He's very good at investing, and he's very good at, expanding the amount of money that he makes. I mean, he is a billionaire, for crying out loud. So bringing aboard J.J. Redick as the new head coach has been the biggest story of the Lakers in quite recently in the offseason, especially since James' return, as, was widely expected, especially since signing his son. And wait just a second, we have a Woj tweet coming in, and I'm just going to go ahead and go into the breaking news segment real quick because this Woj tweet just happened literally 20 seconds ago. So Haywood Highsmith has agreed to a 2-year, $11 million contract to return to the Miami Heat. Jerry Daniels tells ESPN he has significant interest around the league, but stays with franchise that developed him into an NBA player. Like, a lot of teams were really interested in acquiring him in free agency, and this Woj bomb literally just happened like 20 seconds ago. So I just wanted to go ahead and break that out for any of those Miami Heat fans that are interested. But aside from that, let's go ahead and continue talking about LeBron James and his contract. Now, again, as I mentioned before, J.J. Redick signing with the Lakers and LeBron returning to the Lakers has been the only big move that has happened with the Lakers in free agency. They've missed on so many key players, so many important players. They missed on Klay Thompson. They missed on DeMar DeRozan. They've missed on, DeJounte Murray and so many other players in this free agency market that could have improved the roster. And unfortunately, since, they missed out on them, they're not going to improve anything for the Lakers. And now it's really down to the Lakers and their trading. Like, that's going to be the only way that the Lakers can actually acquire significant talent to their roster via trading. Now, they also, another big move that the Lakers have made was drafting Dalton Connect. And he's one of those players that a lot of people were really surprised to get, into the 17th pick in the entire draft. Like, a lot of people suspected that they would get that Connect would be selected a little bit earlier than fall into the hands of the Lakers, because he is one of the better scorers in college, and he's actually one of the more efficient scorers in college. And obviously, with the Lakers not bringing any sort of free agents, it might be difficult to not include Dalton in a trade scenario. Now, I'm not entirely sure exactly if they're going to even include Dalton in the trades, but then again, it would be a lot easier to trade him as opposed to trading one of the key players that they've had on the team for a long time, like Austin Reeves or maybe even D'Angelo Russell or some of the other players off of the bench. And it's not like the Lakers really have that much talent coming off of the bench that other teams are interested in either. So it seems like they might actually, have to trade one of those big-time players. Obviously, nobody is going to be interested in trading for Bronny James. He is the 55 overall pick in the draft, and he's making almost $2 million. And that's obviously a lot of money to pay for a 55 overall pick in the draft. Now, the former route was always going to be difficult. The team pushed right up against the second apron already, so they would have to offload some salaries just to use their $5.2 million taxpayer mid-level exception and remain under the apron. Now, Javon Buha and Shams on the Athletic reported on July 6th that Gary Trent Jr. and Spencer Dinwiddie are two names to watch for if the Lakers clear enough space to use their taxpayer mid-level exception. Now, Spencer Dinwiddie, he was on the Lakers for a short time, and he didn't really do much for the Lakers, so I don't really see why they would try to acquire that kind of player on the roster. Now, Gary Trent Jr., on the other hand, that is a name that is very intriguing to me because I'm very fond of his game. I think he is a great basketball player, and, I shouldn't say great. I think he's a good basketball player, and he's good enough to fill in that role of being the shooter that the Lakers desperately need. Excuse me. Now, granted, a bigger trade could be in the works, but that would most likely require the Lakers parting with a lot of their future draft capital, because a lot of teams are going to be interested in the Lakers and their draft picks. Now, it's risky since, LeBron is also 39 years old, and we have no idea how well he is going to be playing in the next year, especially since he's going to have to be playing Olympic basketball over the summer as well, which could put him at risk of injuring himself. Obviously, LeBron has suffered a lot of injuries when he was on the Lakers, given his old age, and playing in the Olympics and not giving him the rest that he needs is really not ideal. Regardless, staying under the second apron is really, really important for the Los Angeles Lakers. And has become a hard cap for teams, given the penalties for exceeding it. As Charania, I completely botched that name. Teams above the second apron cannot trade first-round picks 7 years in the future. They cannot trade cash in a deal, lose their mid-level exception, are limited to 100% salary matching in trades, and cannot combine multiple players in a deal, among several other restrictions. So, in other words, if you exceed the second apron, your team better be just about, perfect as is and in good position to win multiple titles like the Boston Celtics. And otherwise, building out a solid team becomes incredibly difficult. So that's essentially the reason why LeBron ended up taking that pay cut. and what's to come for the Lakers in the future. Again, I'm not entirely sure if they're going to be able to sign any sort of free agents. Given their luck with free agency, it's really, really bad. And it's almost embarrassing, honestly. But with that, we are out of time for this second segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the third segment where I give a quick update on FIBA basketball. I know I said that I was going to cover some of the Olympic games, and this is part of it because there are several teams that have recently qualified after playing in the FIBA tournaments and the results. So I will be right back after this short break in the third segment talking about FIBA, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking a little bit about FIBA basketball because for the first time since 2007, 2008, the Greek Olympic team has qualified for the Olympics. The Greek basketball team has qualified for the Olympics, and I mentioned on the previous podcast that Giannis Antetokounmpo was going to go up against Luka Doncic and Slovenia in the matchup, and the final score for that game was 96-68 in favor of Greece. That is a huge scoring margin, and obviously, that was just the Greek offense and the Greek defense was just too much for the Slovenian national team. And crazy enough, Giannis wasn't even the leading scorer of that team. Now, I know I have Giannis pointed up here, but he is but Thomas Walkup was actually the leading scorer for the Greek national team. And obviously, Luka Doncic, he was the lead scorer for Slovenia, but he only ended with 21 points. And Luka scoring 21 points it's not going to really, get the team or put the team in a good enough position to win. And aside from playing Slovenia, they also had to play, they also had to play Croatia in the finals, and that ultimately decided, their victory. And since they ended up winning that game, they eventually qualified for the team. Now, Ivica Zubac plays for Croatia. He was the leading scorer on there. He ended with 19 points, but Giannis showed up and ended with 23 points to, cement Greece as an Olympic team. And he also led the team in rebounds as well with 8. Now, I understand, these aren't really, the crazy stats that we're used to seeing from Giannis Antetokounmpo. However, you also have to remember that these basketball tournaments and in FIBA, it's more so a team game than anything else. Pardon me. A lot of players on FIBA aren't really going to score a staggering amount of points as you're expecting them to, considering their NBA career. For example, Michael Jordan, when he was on the Dream Team, he only averaged 15 points in the Olympics, and Scottie Pippen only averaged around 10, and Carmelo Anthony, when he was on the Olympics, only averaged 10 in 2008. And LeBron and Kobe Bryant, they only averaged 15 in 2008, as well as Dwayne Wade, who also averaged 15. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that they played bad. This just means that they played within the system because, again, it's very team-oriented. When you have a team that's surrounded with so much talent, like Team USA, you have to share the ball and you have to sort of, put your ego aside and fill the role that, your team needs. Like in 2008, Chris Bosh, while he is a phenomenal scorer, he mainly prioritized his game on the defensive side of the ball. And, that just better improved Team USA's chances of winning because he is more focused on the defensive side than he is in the scoring aspect of the game. And when you have a player that can do so much like Chris Bosh, can do a lot of scoring, and he's just prioritizing himself on the defense, that is incredibly valuable for any kind of Olympic team in basketball. Like, that is just a luxury that a lot of teams in, the rest of the teams can't really afford, playing with so much talent. Like, the same thing with Luka Doncic. Like, he was the leading scorer of the team with 21 points, but, the rest of the team isn't really, up to par with his standards. Now, in other news with FIBA basketball, France ended up playing Germany, and Victor Wembanyama went off in that game. He ended up scoring 27 points on 11 for 17 from the field, ended up getting 5 rebounds as well as 3 assists in only 19 minutes. 19 minutes, and he scored 27 points. And, the French national team, like, while they've already qualified, they are a squad. Like, if there was any sort of squad that the Team USA should be worried about aside from Canada, it should be France. Because, let's face it, Victor Wembanyama is going to be a threat to literally anyone that plays against him, especially in FIBA where the rules are slightly different. Now, one thing that I also didn't realize about FIBA is that the three-point line is a little bit shorter. Like, it's not the same as the NBA It's not the same as the NBA three-point line, where I believe the difference is just 1 inch. I believe the three-point line is 23.9, or actually maybe 1 foot, I believe the three-point line in the NBA is 23.9 feet away from the basket. I'm going to go ahead and check just to make sure. And the FIBA basketball, the three-point line in FIBA is 22.8 feet away from the basket. Around those lines. But it's a slight difference, but that slight difference means almost everything with FIBA and a lot of these players. So that just gives them a whole more, a greater advantage, especially Steph Curry. It gives Steph Curry a huge advantage in the three-point shooting department, because obviously that is where his value is. In some other news, Puerto Rico also qualified for the Olympics, the basketball team. And yes, that is Jose Alvarado that you see on the screen. And people were wondering if he could shoot. Yes, he can shoot. In one of the games where he played against Italy in the group phase, he ended up scoring 29 points on 7 for 10 from the three-point line. And versus Lithuania in the finals, he ended up scoring 23 points, 4 for 6 from the three-point line. So, and one of the things that's really a little bit underrated, or that gets pushed under the rug, is just how good these international players are when they play with their team. It's a completely different system, and therefore they are forced to go into a completely different role. We know that Jose Alvarado, when he is on the Pelicans, he is mainly, he is a three-point shooter still, obviously, but he's mainly a defender. I mean, Grand Theft Alvarado is his nickname, and you don't really see him having a ridiculous scoring performance as you do in FIBA. That completely, role players in the NBA turn into a different animal when they play FIBA. It happened with Patty Mills when he was playing on Australia. It happened with Manu Ginobili when he was playing in Argentina. Pau Gasol, Marc Gasol, even though they were also first options in the NBA. But they play so much better when they're on their international team, because they have a lot more chemistry on that team as opposed to the chemistry that they have in the NBA. Because remember, a lot of these people, especially we'll use Luka Doncic as an example. He was playing basketball since he was, 16 years old, and probably even younger now that I think about it. But he's been playing with that squad since he was 16. So the chemistry with them is astonishing. you don't really skip a beat when you play with the players that you've played with for so many years. Same thing with Giannis Antetokounmpo. And that's one of the things that a lot of fans don't recognize, is just how good these role players actually are in a system that benefits them and with a team that they've been playing with for so long. Now, in some other FIBA basketball news, some of the teams that ended up qualifying is, other than Greece and Puerto Rico, Latvia ended up qualifying for the Olympics despite losing to Brazil, who also qualified for the Olympics. Actually, yeah, Brazil ended up qualifying for the Olympics, as well as Spain. They also ended up qualifying for the Olympics, I believe. I'm just going to make sure. Yeah, Spain, they ended up beating the team Bahamas, who actually had a relative, they had a pretty good squad. They had DeAndre Ayton as the center. They had Buddy Hield as well. And they also had Eric Gordon playing for them on the Bahamas. So I'm very surprised that this team wasn't able to make it to the Olympics, which, is unfortunate for them. But, aside from that, that is really, those are the teams that ended up qualifying, and those are the teams that are going to end up playing in the Olympics, I believe, just based off of the results of the game. And in some other news, when in the matchup between France and Germany, Evan Fournier and Dennis Schroeder ended up getting into a fight. Now, you guys, the image is rather blurry because I had to screenshot it from a video, but Evan Fournier and Dennis Schroeder, they ended up starting, to choke each other out in the middle of the game. So I'm very curious to see how that's going to put into effect in the Olympics. I don't know if there's going to be a punishment handed out for Evan Fournier, if he's going to be suspended for a couple of games, because in soccer, if you get 2 yellow cards in the span of 2 games, you aren't allowed to play in the next game. And so, it might be a similar punishment coming in for the Olympics with Evan Fournier, but we'll go ahead and see how that unfolds. I just wanted to bring that up because that was a very huge story in the matchup between France and Germany. So with that out of the way, we are out of time for the third segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the fourth segment, where I talk about some basketball news, some more free agent signings, as well as some NBA trades, and Bronny James's Summer League debut. So I will be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be talking about some basketball news. Bronny James, he made his debut in the Summer League, and as well as some NBA trades and free agent signings that ended up happening over the weekend. So we'll obviously start with Bronny and his Summer League debut. Now, he did not have a good game. I am not going to mince words. He played really badly I accidentally touched my mic there. He played really badly in this game. And what makes this, a little bit funny to me is how the graphics, the graphic designers for, calculating the box scores and creating these graphics of players and their stats, they made it seem like Bronny scored 21 points and ended the game with 21 points, as well as, going 2 for 2, right? That's sort of what they made it look like. But in reality, he played 21 minutes and was only able to score 4 points, got 2 assists and 2 rebounds, and I believe he shot 2 for 9 from the field. So again, was not a very efficient outing for Bronny James in his Summer League debut. But I don't really think that a lot of people are going, obviously, a lot of people are going to hate on Bronny for the simple fact that he is LeBron James' son. But I don't think overreacting over just one summer league game is appropriate, despite the fact that he didn't really play that well. I mean, we remember last year, Victor Wembanyama in his first summer league didn't play well at all. And everyone was so quick to call him a bust, to call him the worst draft pick in the NBA. He's not going to amount to this. There were so many people on Twitter just saying this, that, and the other, and even saying that other rookies in his draft class were better than him. And again, they did not take the time to do that at all. Like, it was almost immediately after the first game. And, in the conclusion of the season, now we see just how good Victor Wembanyama actually is, and how the summer league, like that one summer league game, could be considered as a fluke. Like, the hatred from Victor, like the hatred that Victor got from all these NBA fans on the media was ridiculous. And it was just one summer league game that didn't have any bearing on the regular season at all. And it's really, like, it's stunning to me just how quickly the media can change perspective, and how quickly a lot of people are to hate on some of these players. And I don't really expect the hate to be even more so with Bronny, considering how he is LeBron James' son, and there is a lot of pressure for him to do well in the league. However, it should also be noted that Bronny's dad is a billionaire. If you had a dad that was a billionaire, I highly doubt that you would have any sort of aspirations to do all sorts of things like Bronny is doing. I mean, he suffered from cardiac arrest, and here he is back and playing in the NBA. Like, he is trying to make a name for himself, despite the fact that his father owns almost $1 billion to his name. Like, if your father was LeBron James, I highly doubt that you would even bother trying to compete in the NBA and, make a career of your own. Because, like, why would you need to do that, right? Like, so that's something that's really going to get pushed under the rug, despite how Bronny plays. And I feel like that should be taken into account. Now, again, it might sound like I'm giving a lot of leeway to Bronny, but, at the same time, would anyone really try to do anything with their name when they have somebody like LeBron James as their father? I doubt that. But aside from that, we can go into some more basketball news that isn't about Bronny James. Talk about some free agent signings, because there was a lot of them over the weekend, and we also have more details on some of the sign-in trades that were being done in the NBA. So, for the first time in the history of the NBA, there was a 6-team trade. The first time that 6 teams were ever involved in just one trade. And this goes back to the Klay Thompson sign-in trade with the Dallas Mavericks. So the 6 teams that were involved were Dallas, Golden State, the Timberwolves, the Denver Nuggets, the Charlotte Hornets, as well as the 76ers. So I'll just break down this trade right here. So Klay Thompson, obviously, he went to Dallas. So Dallas received Klay Thompson as well as a 2025 second-round pick. Then the Minnesota Timberwolves, they received a 2031 second-round pick swap, as well as a 2025 second-round pick and cash. The Warriors ended up getting Kyle Anderson as well as Buddy Hield. And the Denver Nuggets in this deal, I have no idea how, they ended up getting cash, literally just cash. And the Charlotte Hornets, they were obviously the biggest winner of this trade, because they ended up receiving Josh Green, Reggie Jackson, 2029 second round pick, and 2030 second round pick. They're the biggest winner in terms of like assets that they acquired from this trade. And the 76ers ended up getting a 2031 second round pick. So again, this is the first 6-team trade that we've ever seen in the history of the NBA. And this is all due to the second apron and the new CBA rules, because a lot of teams are trying to avoid getting into that second apron due to the reasons that I mentioned in the second segment. And because of that, a lot of players and a lot of teams, they've had to do several sign-in trades to avoid that second apron. So it's a huge trade, and we'll have to see how all of it turns out. Now, I believe that the Denver Nuggets, they received this cash so that way they're able to try and acquire Russell Westbrook, because that is one of the things that Nikola Jokic for the Denver Nuggets has his eyes set on. Like, he really wants to play with Russ, and he really wants Russ to play under that system. So I believe that's the reason why the Nuggets ended up getting cash. Now, the Timberwolves, obviously, they had to give up some of their players in this trade, so it makes sense that they got some second-round picks and, like, the right to swap, as well as some cash for them to try and improve their roster if they really need to improve their roster. And the Charlotte Hornets, since they were also giving up some of their players, they ended up getting some players in return. And the Sixers, I honestly have no idea why the Sixers were involved in this trade. Just the fact that they were able... Actually, wait, I know why. Because they had to trade Buddy Hield over to the Golden State Warriors on that sign and trade. So it's really confusing to, like, follow all of these, especially with how big of a trade this really is in the basketball world. Like, again, the first ever 6-team sign and trade. Now, let me just go ahead and break down some of the other contract signings that ended up happening over the weekend. Oh, wait a minute. Before I do that, the Nets and the Knicks trade, like the details between the Nets and the Knicks, they were finally announced, and the Nets received so many picks. It's unbelievable from this trade. So the Knicks, they ended up getting Mikal Bridges, obviously, Keita Bates-Diop, and a 2026 Nets second-round pick. But the Nets, they ended up receiving a 2025 Knicks first-round pick, 2025 Bucks first-round pick. It's a top 4 projected pick. 2025 Nets second round, 2027 Knicks first round, 2028 Knicks first swap, with the right to swap, 2029 Knicks first, 2031 Knicks first, Bojan Bogdanovic, Shake Milton on a sign and trade, and Mamadi Diakite. I believe that's how you say his last name. Again, forgive me if I botched it, but this is a huge trade for the Nets. Like, I see this as a win-win. I saw this as a win-win before, just because, it was sort of, I guess, a sacrifice to try and make a team that is able to compete against the Boston Celtics. And since the Nets are in a full rebuild, they are committed to that full rebuild. And having all of these picks at their disposal is just perfect. I love this trade because of so many picks. It seems that the Nets have learned from their mistake of trading away their picks to gain more talent, because if you guys remember, the Nets ended up giving up several picks for Kevin Durant as well as Kyrie Irving, and, well, not really, and they gave up several picks for James Harden, that's what I meant to say, and they didn't really have that much capital in the draft, but now they do. And obviously Kevin Durant and Kyrie, it didn't work for the Brooklyn Nets. And even before that, when they traded for Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, those 2 picks that they ended up giving up ended up being Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who so coincidentally just won the championship. So it seems that they learned from their past mistakes. I really, really do like this trade. Now, in some other free agent signings, since we are running a little bit low on time, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the other, I'm going to speed run through some of these signings. As I mentioned earlier, Franz Wagner signed a 5-year, $224 million contract with the Orlando Magic. I think this is an absurd contract for someone like Franz Wagner. I think he is overpaid to the max. It is ridiculous. I'll do a different segment as well, just covering just covering the contract and figuring out exactly, how bad it actually is. Now, the San Antonio Spurs, they ended up trading Devontae Graham and a second-round pick to the Charlotte Hornets, as sources told, ESPN. And in some other news, Malik Beasley signed a 1-year, $6 million contract with the Detroit Pistons. I think this is a horrible contract for Malik Beasley. He needs to get a better agent, because making $6 million for a year and playing for the Detroit Pistons, literally the worst team in the NBA, is a really, really bad signing. I don't know what he was doing. Now, Caleb Martin, reportedly, he turned down a 5-year, $65 million offer from the Heat a week ago, And now he signed with the 76ers on a 4-year, $32 million contract. So significantly less and huge pay cut that he's taking for some baffling reason. I think he messed up with this contract, honestly. Like, making $32 million is not the same as making $65 million, obviously. It's a huge loss for him. Miles Bridges, who was on the free agent market, he agreed to a 3-year, $75 million contract with the Charlotte Hornets, so he's not going anywhere for Charlotte. And some other news, Dario Saric ended up signing a 2-year, $10 million contract with the Denver Nuggets, sources told ESPN. And let's see, because there were some more free agent signings, and I know I'm missing one. Actually, no, that is the only free agent signing. That is all the free agent signings and all of the trades that recently happened over the weekend. And let me know in the comments what you guys think of this trades. Do you guys think that there are winners? Do you think there are significant losers? I obviously think Caleb Martin is a huge loser in this free agent signing and as well as Malik Beasley, because those two, they just messed up badly. So with that, we are going to go ahead and go into the fifth and the final segment where I give a quick update on the WNBA and who I think has the best chances of winning Rookie of the Year, because history continues to be broken history continues to be made, I should say, and records continue to be broken in the WNBA. So I will go ahead and talk about that after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back to the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, I'm going to give my Rookie of the Year predictions, as well as talk about some huge WNBA news that's been going on. So, for starters, obviously, I can't mention the WNBA without mentioning Caitlin Clark and just how fantastic she's been for the Indiana Fever and just how great she's been overall as a WNBA player and bringing the attention to the WNBA as much as she has. In almost every single most watched game for the WNBA this year, all of them have been with the Fever playing. Like, she is popular and WNBA players just have to deal with it. Now, one of the big reasons why she's popular is because she's just so good at basketball. She's fantastic. One of the cleanest WNBA players that I've seen play the game. And she also became the first rookie in the history of the WNBA to record a triple-double. She ended up getting 19 points, 13 assists, and 12 rebounds in an 83-78 win in an upset over the Liberty on Saturday. Now, they played the Liberty 4 times this year, and they only won that recent one, and that was with Caitlin Clark getting a triple-double. So it just goes to show how much she has to do and what she has to do in order to enable her team to win. And she could honestly gain way more assists if her teammates can just catch the ball. That is one of the biggest problems that I have with the Fever. It's just they are so unbearably incompetent for Caitlin. Like, the skill gap between her and the rest of her team is apparent, except for Aaliyah Boston. She is a phenomenal hooper. She definitely is fantastic. And the coaching as well is also a problem that I have with the Fever. And her performance is nothing short of extraordinary. Now, she is, as a rookie, getting a triple-double is honestly, like, it's really difficult, especially in the NBA. Like, there aren't that many rookies that have had a triple-double in their first year with the NBA. I mean, Jason Tatum wasn't able to get a triple-double as a rookie. Draymond Green was unable to get a triple-double as a rookie, but she was able to do so. So, again, history has been made. She is the first WNBA rookie to ever record a triple-double. And another famous rookie that is also making headlines is Angel Reese. She is breaking records as we speak. She now has the most consecutive double-doubles in WNBA history. 13 consecutive double-doubles as of right now. Obviously, that is subject to change as, games continue to go forward. And Angel just makes it look really, really easy getting these double-doubles. And it makes total sense because this sounds like a little bit of hater logic. I'm not going to lie, this does sound a little bit of hater logic, but a lot of her rebounds are off of her own misses. And that ultimately, helps her with her stats, and it helps her, continue this streak. I'm not saying that she isn't a great rebound because, let's face it, Camila Cardoso, who is another rookie on the Chicago Sky, she is also ridiculously tall compared to everybody else in the WNBA. And she's not even having a ridiculous season or as good of a season as Angel Reese is having. Even in the rebounding category. Cardoso, she only averages 7 rebounds per game compared to Angel, who's averaging 11 rebounds per game as well as 14 points. Now, the big problem with Angel really is her efficiency, in my opinion. And that's also a really big problem with Caitlin Clark as well. Neither of these women are rather efficient shooting from the field, but it's more so apparent with Angel than it is with Caitlin, because with Caitlin Clark, obviously, she is taking a lot more difficult shots than Angel. Angel only recently scored her first 3-point basket. I believe it was against the Storm on Friday. And let me just go ahead and look at the box scores right here. And yeah, Angel Reese, she ended up getting 27 points and shot 2 for 2 from the 3-point line. And we do have a comment coming in from, let me just go ahead and see, from him. Whoa, his name is him. So he has a question. What if the NBA and the WNBA made a merge? WNBA players will be given the chance to be drafted in the WNBA in the expansion draft. Okay, I think those are two different questions. So what if the NBA and WNBA made a merge? Now, that would be horrible for the WNBA, in my opinion. That would be really, really bad because we have another comment from, he made a typo. So NBA players will be given the chance to be drafted in the WNBA in the expansion draft. I think that's what you're trying to say, but I don't think this is a good idea at all because obviously, there's just no question about it that a majority of WNBA players, they just cannot compete with NBA players. It's well known, and it's, yes, WNBA to NBA. So WNBA players going over to the NBA. The physicality of the NBA, while I will admit it's not really as physical as it used to be, but as unfortunate as it is, it's genuinely just how it works. NBA players, and they're going to be stronger than WNBA players. Naturally, they're just going to be stronger. I know people don't I know a lot of females, they probably won't like hearing that, but that's just how it works. And you're essentially setting yourself up as a defensive mismatch regardless of who you're going up against. Not to mention, the height difference is also a very major factor. While Angel Reese is considered a big woman, I guess, because I can't really say a big man because, but she is a power forward, and she also, she plays center, but her height is really going to hinder her when she goes into the NBA because as a power forward, she's only 6'3", And she looks so much taller than the rest of the WNBA players, but she will not be able to play power forward in the NBA at all. She would have to be forced to playing a point guard. And considering how only just on Friday she made her first three-point shot, it's not a really good fit. And not to mention, let me just go ahead and figure out Caitlin Clark and how tall she is. I believe she's not even 6 feet tall, if I remember correctly. Let me just go ahead and make sure that I'm right in that regard. Again, she is tall. Yeah, okay. She's literally exactly 6 feet tall. And we always give Trae Young a lot of sort of problems with his height and being a defensive liability. Imagine Caitlin being on the court and being such a liability on the defensive side of the ball. Not to mention, just like, I mean, every NBA guard, the average NBA guard, like point guard now, is going to be either 6'3" or even 6'6" because of how the league is just, you know, the height is just expanding, and so many other players and so many other positions are playing the point guard position. It is just going to be a mismatch regardless of who you go up against. And I'm just talking about the defensive side of the ball. And on the offensive side, I feel like a lot of these players, they're going to get torched by NBA players. In fact, a coach for the Olympics, women's Olympic team, the women's Olympic team, there was a debate about prime Boogie Cousins going up against prime Brittany Griner, who would win in a one-on-one. And the coach for the WNBA Olympic team said if there was no referee, he is grabbing all of his money, selling his house, and putting all of his money on DeMarcus Cousins. That just shows how huge the skill gap between the NBA and the WNBA actually is. And as unfortunate as it is, like the WNBA players, they just will not be able to compete with any NBA players. And it would really just make the WNBA lose a lot more credibility because they would get absolutely destroyed. Like the Pistons would destroy any WNBA team that you can put out on the court. Like it could be the Liberty, it could be the Mercury, it could be whichever team that you could think of. It could even be the Spark with Cameron Brink. They are going to get destroyed. And I don't want to say anything that's like sort of, I guess, you know, sexist or like discriminating like towards these WNBA players, because let's face it, they would beat me in a one-on-one and they would beat all of us average Joes. But NBA players, they are on a whole other level and they would get destroyed. Like that's my, so I don't really think they should do a merger in the NBA or the, like, for the WNBA. Now, 3-point shooting contests, that's a different story. I love to see 3-point shooting contests between Sabrina and Steph Curry. I loved that matchup. And maybe, you know, friendly 3-on-3 games, that would be something like, you know, for All-Star break that I would like to see. But again, I just genuinely think that NBA players, they're just going to have a field day with all of these WNBA players. That's just me, however. And while the WNBA players, they're definitely going to disagree on that, that's just a cold, hard fact, as sorry as it is. Now, for Rookie of the Year, that's what I was supposed to be talking about. I mean, with Rookie of the Year, I genuinely feel like it should be Caitlin Clark, just because, like, as I mentioned before, while they do struggle on efficiency, both of them, Caitlin ends up taking a lot more difficult shots than just layups. Like, the fact that Angel Reese is inefficient on layups really rubs me the wrong way, because it's like you're so much taller than every other WNBA player that most of the WNBA players that you go up against, and yet you still find a way to be inefficient on layups. I mean, in the game before that I mentioned, Angel Reese, when she was playing against the Dream, they ended up winning, but she shot 5 for 12 from the field, and these are layups. 5 for 12, 12 points on just layups. And then in the previous game, before that, let me just go ahead and pull up on Sunday, on June 30th, when she was playing the Minnesota Lynx. Let me just go ahead and pan over to Angel Reese right here. She ended up only getting 10 points and shot 4 for 16 on layups. Like, these are just layups. And the inefficiency, I don't understand it. Now, with Caitlin, I totally understand the inefficiency there, because she's taking ridiculously deep 3-point shots, because let's face it, that's like the only shot that the WNBA players are actually giving her. And she's struggling with the double teams. And granted, the team doesn't really help. I feel like the NBA players, they just have a better understanding of where to stand, where to play, and just how to play the game efficiently and effectively, more so than a lot of these WNBA teams know how to do it. Granted, I'm not saying that the WNBA teams aren't efficient and they aren't playing efficient basketball, but compared to the NBA, it's a huge gap. And I don't like doing it because it just discredits a lot of the talent that the WNBA actually has. But when you're comparing it to the men, there's just no comparison, in my personal opinion. Like, how do I put this? Imagine Joel Embiid on Angel Reese. Like, just imagine the amount of points Joel Embiid is going to drop on a 6'3" power forward. Imagine Jokic on Angel Reese. Imagine Steph Curry on Caitlin Clark. Like, it's just not, you can't, it's something that you can't really do. Luka Doncic on Caitlin Clark. Luka Doncic on Sabrina Ionescu. Like, majority of these NBA players are just going to back down whichever female basketball player is going to be guarding them. Like, and there's nothing that the female basketball player is going to be able to do about it aside from asking for a double team, which in turn leaves other NBA players wide open to hit easy shots. And again, it's just a liability on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm not even talking about on the offensive side, because they could perform and they could score on the offense now, granted, I genuinely feel like Angel Reese would have a really difficult time scoring on any NBA center. It doesn't matter who it is. She's going to have a difficult time. Like, scoring on LeBron James, she's going to have a very difficult time scoring on him. Scoring on Victor Wembanyama, Jesus Christ. Imagine Victor Wembanyama playing against any of those short female basketball players. Like, really, it's the height difference and the physicality that's just really hindering them, and it's something that they can't really control. I'm sorry, that's how it is, but that's just the way it is. And I can't really sort of like defend any of those WNBA players, because I genuinely just don't feel that any of them would be able to match up properly against NBA players. To answer your question, so I think it's a horrible idea. I don't think the WNBA should do that. It makes total sense why the WNBA doesn't do that. And if they did do that, it would be rather embarrassing for the WNBA and their players, I think. Like, the amount of ridicule that they would get from the media, like from Twitter and all sorts of places, is just going to be ridiculous. And it wouldn't be a good idea now, especially when, like, the WNBA is gaining all of this traction from watching Caitlin and watching her hoop. Like, it just wouldn't be good. Like, right now, wouldn't be good. Now, one of the players that, if there was any player that I think would be able to get a roster in the NBA, it would be Caitlin. Like, it would be Caitlin Clark. Despite her defensive liability, her scoring, it might bring some sort of value to, like, the Detroit Pistons and things of that nature. But again, the another big problem is just, the physicality on the defensive side, because it is going to be rather difficult to blow by an NBA guard more so than it is to blow by a WNBA guard. Like, again, that's just my opinion. Now, obviously, like, I could be flat out wrong if they do end up doing that, but I genuinely don't think that they will. And considering how a coach for the WNBA, or like the women's national Olympic team, was willing to bet all of his money on DeMarcus Cousins winning against Brittany Griner, it just shows, like, the amount of skill gap she's, like, the huge difference between the NBA and the WNBA. TJ in the chat actually says he's a host for the sports podcast, so go ahead and tune into his podcast. It's directly after mine. I think Aja Wilson could get minutes in the NBA. She's actually a dog. I totally forgot to even mention her. Yes, she could probably gain some minutes in the NBA. Yes, I totally agree with you on that. But again, the big problem is going to be the defensive liability and just, like, how she's going to be on the court. Like, because in the NBA, you're going to have to you're switching a lot on screens. So a lot of NBA players can just force Aja to switch and therefore create a mismatch. for either the big man or for either the guard, whoever A'ja is going to be guarding. And that's really like the ultimate problem, the defensive side of the game. Like, while it's not really looked upon as, as positively as it used to be, it's still half the game. Like, half the game is played on the other side of the court. Well, I mean, I guess for good teams, a little bit less than half, because they spend a lot more time on the offensive side of the court, right? But half the game is played on the defensive side of the court majority of the time. And if you are also, on top of the fact, I completely forgot that these WNBA players, like, Kaylin's teammates can't even catch the ball. Like, you really think they're going to be able to compete with those NBA players? I don't really think a majority could. But it's only like a select few. But aside from that, we are out of time for this segment. That is the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for that question. It did spark a lot of debate. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you so much for all of you tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that